Hey everybody, welcome to What the Flick, episode 6 of Feud, Hagsploitation. I can't believe there's only 2 left.
I know, we were just talking about how sad we are. It's a lot to wrap up because this episode, again, I love it. I love this show so much. This episode really only takes us to the very beginning of the trouble with the production of Hush Hush, Sweet Charlotte.
Right, yeah, I mean, at the end of this episode, Joan Crawford is still in the cast and it's still called Whatever Happened to Cousin Charlotte.
And she still, well, at least towards the tail end, is cautiously optimistic and hoping, you know, for the best, I guess, or at least trying to turn over a new leaf.
Well, let's start at the beginning with William Castle. And the casting of John Waters, which is so perfect. Thank you, Feud. Because Waters is a longtime fan of Castle, and in fact, I think Castle had kind of fallen out of the collective memory, and then Waters wrote a rather well-known essay, I think for American Film Magazine. It was later reprinted in one of his books of essays called "Step Right Up, I'm Gonna Scare the Pants Off America," which is the name of Castle's autobiography, which Waters helped get put back in print. And Waters did a salute to Castle at the Telluride Film Festival, where they actually brought back like Percepto and Emergo and all the gimmicky stuff, where like the buzzing seats and the floating skeletons,
flying over the audience,
and the coward's corner and all that good stuff. So for Waters to play Castle, I mean, yeah, they don't look alike at all, but it was perfect.
It was really perfect. I know that the last episode we talked about the Oscars and how some of the casting choices they felt sort of weird here and there, like with Betty Duke. But this was a moment with this show when it does it well, it really knocks it out of the park. And I could have cheered when I saw John Waters walk out on stage, and they really nailed the gimmicks. And I think that in just one short scene, it really gave viewers that might not have been as familiar the idea of how you would drum up publicity about a film in those days.
Right.
Today, if this were the same movie with an aging actress playing an axe murderer, you would do this once, it would get filmed, it would go viral on the internet. She wouldn't have to tour the way that she was doing.
And it would open on 2,000 screens and it would have an opening weekend and then go away. But this was in an era where like movies would kind of tour around, they would play a few theaters at a time. If you saw the movie Matinee, John Goodman is basically playing William Castle, and it's a salute to that kind of, not just the filmmaking, but the sort of hucksterism that goes with it, the hyping, you know.
You had to have a sort of a grassroots movement to get your film, for people to talk about it, for it to really catch on. And we see that this puts an enormous amount of stress on an aging Joan Crawford, who I think they're doing a good job of seeing that her alcoholism, especially towards the end of her life, was reaching sort of a boiling point.
Sure.
You see that, you know, her face, I don't know if this is actually, maybe I'm just projecting onto this, but her face, it does get sort of swollen as we see her in later pictures.
Yeah, and just the sort of indignity of like people throwing popcorn at her and stuff. But like that's what when you signed on for a William Castle movie, that's what you were going to get.
Yeah.
You were going to have the girls come out with the cardboard axes on stage. So that's like a perfect encapsulation of where Joan was post Baby Jane. And so you understand why she would sort of even consider the notion of working with Betty again. You know, on Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, and Jack Warner also sort of seeing that his days are numbered, you know, trying to kind of rekindle that magic, because that was like one of the few hits that his studio had. It's funny, I had heard the term Hagsploitation before. I always assumed it came later, like it came like post Blaxploitation from the early 70s, but I guess I will take this show's word for it that Jack Warner made it up, but if somebody knows otherwise, let us know. The Grand Dame Guignol is maybe the more polite way to refer to this subgenre.
Hagsploitation?
Hagsploitation, no, it's catchy.
It's definitely very Jack Warner, that's why you believe it.
Sure, totally. So, but this was a very Joan episode. Like,
yeah, we didn't get a lot from Betty, who you know, after whatever happened to Baby Jane, was working, but mostly in television.
Yes.
And you know, there wasn't, I guess there wasn't as big of a sort of fall from grace story as there was with Jane, which is with Joan, which is, you know, why I think we followed her in this episode.
Right, and I assume if next episode is going to be about the making of Charlotte and Joan leaves, then that's going to be a Betty episode.
Betty heavy.
Right, exactly. So they're just kind of balancing it out. So yeah, no, so great episode where Aldrich is back and
he's getting divorced. I was wondering if they were going to address that because his wife is, I know we've talked about this before, is such a strong actress. You are always enthralled with her every scene.
Price, yeah.
Molly Price, and I think that they played that out really well. It wasn't, from what I have understand about Robert Aldrich's life, that it wasn't really that dramatic of a divorce, but it was very sad.
Well, yeah, they had a lot of kids, obviously, and they'd been together for a long time. So that's happening. And then speaking of careers on the decline, obviously Hedda Hopper, is ailing and sort of sees that her days are numbered, and she wants to have one last big scoop, which is to fuck over Joan with this supposed porn tape.
Alonso, now we get into it. I go back and forth. I don't really know where I land. Obviously, it is a big rumor. It's almost a folklore that Joan Crawford was in the early stages of her career in a porno,
right?
A stag film, as they call it in the show. And I don't think that I have heard an account where anyone has actually seen it or that it has existed physically.
There's not really anything conclusive. Like Kenneth Anger writes about it in one of the Hollywood Babylon books, and I think even that book might have a still of somebody who looks like she might be Joan at that age, but who knows? But obviously, it's enough of an urban legend or whatever that she feels the need to have to bribe her brother to shut up about it. And apparently, she and her brother had a terrible relationship, as she did with her mother, which they kind of touch on here as well. The brother, by the way, played by the great Raymond J. Barry, who for me is always the police chief in The Ref, but one of those character actors who's just been in everything. So dealing with that stuff, and even you do not make Mamacita mad.
No, I think that Mamacita is just is another character that you see her in every episode, and then she has these moments where she really shines. And I took the sneak peek at next week's episode. It looks like we're going to get another moment between Joan and Mamacita. What I thought was interesting is that they made a choice that I think from the writing that the tape does exist. At least that seems how Jessica Lange is portraying it.
Right. I mean, she asked him to hand the film over at the end, so obviously she thinks it exists.
Right. So, and from other sort of, I know that they talked about it a little bit on the You Must Remember This podcast, and it sort of seems as though it is possible that Joan it's possible that Joan did engage in some questionable behavior, or what some people might deem like sexually deviant behavior or morality or whatever in the early stages of her career, but whether or not there is a tape is sort of up for speculation. But I thought it was interesting that the show comes down pretty hard and fast that the tape does exist somewhere.
The film. This is the 1960s.
The film exists.
The film. But I God, that amazing Hedda Hopper speech where she's like, I ruined a bunch of careers, but they were all, queers and drunks and commies,
dope heads, I mean, Hedda Hopper is another, she has these moments where you kind of think that she's going to say one thing and then she just totally pivots. And that was what he was like, I look back on my life and what have I done? And then she's like, and I love it. I love what I've done. I've exposed these people because they undercut what we've tried to build in Hollywood.
So I know, I've heard some corners of the filmmaking community complaining about how Aldrich is portrayed in this show, that they don't take him seriously enough and they don't give him his props. I love that he outfoxes Jack Warner.
Really good.
And you go, oh, really? You're going to pay me less? I'm taking this over to Zanuck because it's my project and fuck you. Nobody mentions that this is also based on a Henry Farrell novel, as Baby Jane was. They sort of act like this script kind of emerged.
That he wrote it.
Yeah, like it just came out of the side.
And he's like, whatever happened
Zeus's
to
head,
cousin Charlotte.
Yeah. So I think Aldrich is getting his due here, and I think he's a fascinating character. I mean, not just because he's being played so well by Alfred Molina, but the stuff that he's juggling and the personal issues and the scenes that he has with Sarandon, where Bette Davis is really kind of being compassionate to him in a tough lovey kind of way, like where he's like, oh, my wife's leaving me. She's like, well, that will be bad for a long time, but we carry on.
I think that people that are coming into the show might be like, well, he was this great director and I can't believe that he's not getting the credit that he's due. But Robert Aldrich is a very interesting director, and going through his filmography, he really had a diverse movies that he directed, but he wasn't considered a great director. The way that Jack Warner is treating him is, from what I understand, is cohesive with how he would have been thought of in the industry.
A lot of filmmakers were not, who time has been kind to, or critics have later kind of discovered. Like a lot of the filmmakers of the French New Wave, when those guys were still film critics at Cahiers du Cinema, Godard and Truffaut and those guys, they were championing people like Howard Hawks and Nicholas Ray and Hitchcock, who were considered these sort of studio journeymen. Like Hitchcock is one of the few who sort of lived long enough that he had this kind of they take me seriously now era.
He got the acclaim later.
Exactly, he got to live to see that. But for a lot of these guys, it was sort of like, they were just sort of considered, guys who you'd plug into whatever movie. Like Howard Hawks never had this sort of, genre. Like he could do comedies or westerns or musicals or whatever, and he would pull it off. But it took somebody else to sort of say, oh no, wait, he's actually a great filmmaker, and there's this connective tissue that he brings as an artist from film to film. So I think that Jack Warner would have sloughed off Aldrich as just being like a journeyman director. But now, with the benefit of hindsight, we realize he had this extraordinary career, and he did these super macho like war movies and westerns, but then he did all these really fascinating films with female protagonists.
Right.
So I agree. I think the show is true to the era in how people thought of that.
And the way that we think of whatever happened to Baby J now, especially if you're of my generation, we forget that it didn't really at the time change anyone's lives. The movie was great. It was beloved. It made a lot of money. Bette Davis was nominated for an Oscar, but they still were not getting the offers and the attention that I guess they were getting more than they were before.
But they were getting more movies like that. I mean,
like Bette Davis and Joan Crawford specifically.
Oh no, absolutely. Yeah. But Warner was right that movie did single-handedly launch this whole sort of genre of, and I love that Warner speech about people love these movies because they used to revere these women, and now they get to see them taken down a peg. And there is that streak of cruelty in this genre, where like you used to be gorgeous and untouchable and perfect and on a pedestal, and now you're old and wrinkly.
You're an axe murderer in a straitjacket.
Or you're trapped in an elevator, or you're in a wheelchair, or you're like crazy, and so it's like, So there is always sort of a weird kind of underlying misogyny to the popularity of these films, and I think this show is very smart about not giving into that misogyny and being about it and not just sort of a product of it,
Yeah. So 2 episodes left. I can't imagine what the finale is going to be, but I have a feeling that the next episode is going to be
all Charlotte all the time.
All Charlotte all the time.
If you've been waiting for Catherine Zeta-Jones to really bust it out, this is her moment.
And so
who's going to play Agnes Moorehead though? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really cool next episode, and then it's done, and then Feud, Bette and Joan is done.
If this show doesn't take us all the way to Wicked Stepmother, I'm going to be a little disappointed.
I wonder if they're going to have a montage.
And there better be some fucking Trog.
I want Trog.
Right?
I love Trog so much. I want Trog. I also, just a quick shout out. I thought that the recreation of the trailer for Straight Jacket with Jessica Lange was really on point. They got everything.
That's why this whole show existed, I think, just so they could do the shot-by-shot version of the Straight Jacket trailer. I want to give a quick, speaking of shout outs, my friend Jeffrey Schwartz did a great documentary about William Castle called Spine Tingler. It is available on DVD. I think it might even be on Netflix, but it's part of this William Castle box set that Sony put out a few years ago. He also did a very extensive DVD extra on the Straight Jacket DVD.
Oh, nice.
All about Joan Crawford and all about her working with William Castle. So if this has whet your appetite for more, go find those docs.
Yeah, that's what I'm watching tonight.
All righty. Okay, so God, 2 more. What?
I'm sad.
This is so awesome. All right, so thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next week.